Welcome to episode 38 of the POG Show, the Port Orange Government News and Information Podcast. I'm your host, Mike Springer, the Public Information Officer for the City of Port Orange. And today I'm joined by one of our city's civil engineers, James Tiffany. James, welcome.
Good morning.
Good morning. And today we're going to be talking about a project that's going to be happening here relatively soon. I know people are already starting to see some of the legwork out there with those stakes in the ground for this Jackson Oak Street drainage project that we're doing there with the drainage and also the sidewalks as well and the accessibility. So just to start off, James, you've been with the city about 2 years now?
Yeah, about 2.5 years, yes, sir.
And where were you before coming to Port Orange?
I worked at Utilities Commission in New Smyrna Beach. I also worked CPH engineers, Zev Cohen, local engineering firms, and did a small stint at Siemens near UCF.
So you probably have a lot of experience in kind
Sure.
of seeing these projects, get off the ground and start being implemented. And one of the big ones we have coming up is the Jackson Oak Street project starting
Correct.
to go on a little bit right now. And this has been something the city's been working on for a few years now, or at least planning for a couple of years now.
Sure. It was before, Hurricane Ian and Nicole came through. We were, working on this project, and the retrofit projects obviously take time to accommodate, the existing utilities infrastructure out there to make sure we accommodate for all those needs.
Because this is one of our older neighborhoods, basically, that we're looking at making some improvements and enhancements to over there, kind of by Canal View between Dunlaw over in that Jackson Oak Street area. What exactly is the city looking to kind of do there with this project?
Mike, as you know, that street's pretty narrow. It was a historic carriage road. The clear zones from the power poles are not sufficient or adequate, and honestly, it's kind of unsafe. So our plan is to culvert the existing swale, put a sidewalk on top of that, add drainage inlets to collect the stormwater, and widen that road a little bit to make the road, promote safety in that area for pedestrians and for car thoroughfare.
So it's a Jackson Street that's going to be widened a little bit there, or where's
Correct.
the widening going to
Jackson will be widened roughly from Oak Street to Canal View Boulevard, and so that will allow a little more space, and then eliminate the swale off to the west side of that road.
How much are we going to be widening that road there roughly?
It's about 2 feet, just to conform to the standard lane widths of car lanes.
So not adding like an additional travel lane, just kind of making the existing lanes a little bit larger to kind of make it easier for people to.
That's correct. Yeah. So you're not traveling as close to the oncoming traffic. Right.
And this is, like you said, this has been something the city's been looking at doing for just a couple of years now to kind of address some of those concerns with drivers out there and pedestrians too, because there's sometimes where you're walking on the sidewalk there and then it ends and it's not really connected to the other part of the sidewalk.
Right. The connectivity, pedestrian access, accessibility, things of that nature, and ultimately, provide safe travel for cars as well.
But what's going to be happening with the sidewalks and the power lines? I know, so you talked about widening the road. What are we going to see kind of happen with those sidewalks and the power lines as well too along Jackson?
The power lines there are obviously due for some hardening. The portion from Oak Street on Jackson to Diane Avenue, I believe it is going to be underground with a 10-foot easement into the properties that are there. We're working to get that approval from the residents to make that happen. The reasoning for that is the right-of-way width there is not sufficient to really move the poles back and maintain the widths and things that we're trying to accommodate there. Once you get beyond Diane north, the right-of-way opens up and we're able to push the power poles to the property line, and those will remain overhead in that portion at the back side of the sidewalks there. So
that should probably add some resiliency to the lines there, especially when you're moving them underground a little bit.
Absolutely, yes.
Especially with all the storms and everything we see there.
Yes,
so hopefully
yes.
that makes them a little bit stronger if we have any kind of strong wind gusts.
Right. The current configuration, the poles are kind of in the swales and are susceptible to erosion, moving water, things of that nature that aren't necessarily conducive to power pole remaining upright. So this will be helpful in that regard to make sure that they're hardened and ready for the next storm.
And I know you mentioned the swales there. Are there any additional kind of drainage or stormwater improvements we were looking to make kind of in that area too?
Yeah, we've been, obviously getting concerns from residents, like how's this going to work with my house? We are implementing drainage inlets. They'll have yard drains that connect through to the throat inlets in the roadway to collect the individual runoff from the houses as well. So they will have drainage connections at their property lines as well at each throat inlet along Jackson to collect that water as well.
So for people who maybe not that familiar with how Jackson Street is kind of set up there, what's the current look of it with the drainage, and then kind of what will be the new look and feel with the drainage and the sidewalks going?
Right. Well, currently there's no high back curb or anything like that.
And when you say a high back curb, what does that mean?
A raised curb, 6-inch curb and gutter will be along the west side of the road on Jackson. Those will then, the gutters will then go to the throat inlets to collect the storm water. So there will be that element, and then there will be a small green strip space and a 5-foot wide sidewalk, after that green space, and then the power poles behind that. Underneath the sidewalk is the swale, which would now be culverted and elliptical storm pipe. So that'll be the lay of the land. The east side of the road will still, I believe, remain uncurbed to allow the water to flow from the houses to the throat inlets on the west side of the road where the swale is.
Do you know if this will increase the capacity at all for the stormwater in the area, or just kind of make it a little bit more upgraded to kind of improve the current conditions?
It won't necessarily increase the capacity. It does reduce it a small amount, but the conveyance of it will move obviously faster, so your time of concentrations will lower.
So you're able to move that rainwater out at a quicker rate than what we currently do.
Quicker rate. It's a lot easier to maintain. I mean, currently we have to, block a lane of traffic and, groom that swale regularly and seasonally. Over time you start getting erosion or, trees grow into it and things of that nature. It just becomes difficult to maintain. So it's a lot easier with our vac trucks and things to, perform the maintenance on the throat inlets and, cleaning back the pipes versus grooming a swale, roadside swale.
So quicker movement of the water, getting it out of that neighborhood faster.
Sure.
Also easier maintenance and upkeep for crews who may have to go there with the vac on or the Menzie muck and do any kind of that cleaning over there as well. So that kind of reduces your maintenance time in that area.
Sure.
And so going on right now, if I live on Jackson Street, James, what can I expect as a homeowner there? What am I going to be seeing here in the coming weeks and months as this project progresses? What's the timeline we're really looking at here?
We're starting on Oak Street, which has another element we'll speak of, I'm sure, later, but around November 2024. And the length of the project, is approximately, a year or so to get that resolved. And all cleaned up, but they're working in the areas where we don't have the FPL overhead lines first, because they can begin that process without FPL's input at this point to get the ball rolling. So the contractor has indicated roughly around November of this year they should be beginning. They're doing staking out there currently to kind of get FPL's bearings of where the right of way is and where the silt fence goes. So we're not quite there on beginning, but it's coming soon.
So there are some stakes out now here, kind of mid-September, marking kind of that FP&L easement. So if people see that, that's kind of what's being marked, is that easement for FP&L in case they need to move those.
Well, it's more to mark the silt fence. Approximately 6 inches or so from that. Half a foot is the actual right-of-way line, so that FPL could perform their design for that overhead conversion for the one part, and then the moving of the overhead back to the property lines in the other portion.
And you had brought up Oak Street a little bit earlier. Talk to me kind of what are we going to see with the Oak Street portion of the project?
There's a canal or swale rather on the south side of Oak Street, and Oak Street will have that now placed in a culvert as well. There'll be drainage inlets to collect the stormwater along that portion as well. The curb that's currently on the north side will remain. The road will be mill and resurfaced, similar to what they're doing on Jackson Street. And then there will be some connectivity of sidewalks for pedestrians from the existing Beacon Woods development into the Memorial Park there. So there'll be some crosswalk, paint striping, things of that nature to clean that up. So the roadside swale will go away. It'll be piped. Inlets will be, placed along the way. So,
will that piping impact driveway aprons or anything like that at all? Or what kind of, as a homeowner, should I expect to see, if any, effects onto my property?
On Oak Street, the swale isn't, going to affect any driveways because it's abutting that park. But in the Jackson Street, obviously, we're running on the west side of Jackson Street, and there are several driveways along that way. The piping or culverting will be going under those existing driveways. The existing driveways will have to be open cut and the pipe placed, and then the city will replace those driveways, to construct that pipe. So,
and I'm sure the contractor's going to work with the homeowners to kind of figure out times to do that.
Sure, they will let them know in advance when they're going to be approaching that, work out the best way to keep them accessible to their home. We don't want to, have any issues where we're not allowing residents to get to their home, but it shouldn't be an issue. They've done projects like this in the past, and it's just a coordination and, consideration on both parts to make it happen.
And just minimizing any of those disruptions as much as possible.
Sure, absolutely.
There's a lot of trees in that area too.
Sure.
What's going to happen with those trees? What are we looking at with some of those trees along?
The portion I spoke of earlier on Jackson from Oak Street to Diane has got a lot of trees that I spoke earlier about the right-of-way width being narrower. In that portion, they're going to do underground electric to minimize the impacts to the trees with a 10-foot FPL easement to run on the into the property versus in the right-of-way. To gain us space for the drainage and water mains and things that are already currently there. So in that portion, the trees will be, tried to maintain. We'll do directional drilling so that we'll minimize the impact to the trees. As we move further north from Diane Ave, the trees are pretty much, there might be one or two that are taken along the common, there's a multifamily development that abuts there. There might be one or two trees that go, but the majority of the trees will just be trimmed back for FPL purposes to maintain clearance from the trees and the power lines that they need to, maintain service to everybody. So they'll just basically be grooming and trimming the trees, up high at like 40, 50 feet to keep that separation maintained. And
I know we're still kind of in that hurricane season right now. As this work goes on with those culverts and swales, is there any stormwater impacts we're looking at in the neighborhood? Would anything change from what I normally see as work progresses with these projects?
No, I mean, the contractors will be aware, when storms are coming, they will work with them to make sure that, proper measures are made and that their system isn't impaired, during storm events and shored up for storm events. At the end of the day, when the project's done, the system should function similarly to what was, existing. Hopefully, the goal is to have all of this move swimmingly. There's no issues or concerns. But, we always have obstacles with retrofit projects that we have to overcome, and we do.
So overall, this is a project that's going to have several parts to it. You're looking at improving accessibility for drivers down those roads as well as for pedestrians who may be using those sidewalks. You're going to be able to move stormwater out of that area at a faster rate. And then there's also going to be some hardening with some of the utilities as some of those power lines will go underground here.
Correct. And the existing power poles will be replaced with new by FPL for the overhead element from Diane Ave to Canal View. So to me, it's a win-win.
Anything else, James, you think people should know about this project or be aware of?
No, not that I can think of.
If residents listening, if they have any questions or concerns, how can they reach out or how can they get those questions answered? Where can they go?
They can feel free to reach out to me. My information should be on the websites, but my email is jtiffany@port-orange.org. So feel free to reach out and, I'll do my best to answer your questions.
All right. Well, James, good luck with the project. We'll hopefully catch back up with you as things progress there and see how it's going. But thank you for joining us here. And Mick, take us on out.
Thank you.